Hello, welcome to Noles Quality Control. I'm your host, Ben Meyerson of Tomahawk Nation. It's been an interesting day in the Florida State football universe. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on online, on Twitter specifically, if you guys haven't seen it already. But we're going to be talking about a few things today. We're going to be talking about the obvious news that's going on. We'll also be talking about the spring game, some takeaways that we have from it. And today, I'm joined by my guy, Tommy Meyer, over at Tomahawk Nation, and Perry Kostidakis, the editor of Tomahawk Nation. And I know I nailed the pronunciation of his name there because I asked him several times before we started.
We did like 3 takes.
Anyways, we have some interesting stuff going on here, just to say the least. I'm just going to start sharing my screen over so you guys can see Tomahawk Nation's Twitter, and we can talk about the news of the day. Amarius Mims is on campus at Florida State. Obviously, this would be one of the biggest stories that has ever happened in the Mike Norvell era, if not the biggest. Obviously, there's, that story from December. I don't know if anyone remembers that.
Some random recruit, yeah.
Yeah, whatever happened there. But there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. Like you can see, our Max Escarpio of Tomahawk Nation is over there at the Moore Center right now. You can see some of the pictures he's been taking. Amarius has been at the Moore Center since about 10:30 this morning. I was there myself around 11:30. I drove there as fast as I could. He was there with Alex Atkins, Mike Norvell, and Mike waved over to us at the media. At least some of us. Maybe not all of us, but as you can see, it's things are getting really interesting and things are heating up right now. So, first off, Tommy, what do you think this would mean for FSU if this were to happen? Because I will say today is April 14th. It's 4/14, a significant day for Seminole fans, if you didn't know, 4th and 14. Would be a hell of a day to get a commitment from the top transfer prospects.
I think it would be huge, and I think it would take some of the sting off of, the fan base thinking like, Mike Norvell's not doing anything, like nobody's invested, this program's not invested, like all the like yada 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 you hear. I think that landing a guy like him would be major for this program going forward, especially at that position.
Yeah, especially agree there on just the investment. Like you have people excited right now and donating. We see like the Rising Spear rolling and everybody getting on that train. If this works, then that's just validation to everybody who is committing to this program, and it kind of amps things up and gets things right back on the right track.
Yeah, and you want to talk about positive momentum for your for your program. This would be, I mean, like you said, Perry, I think this would be the type of thing that could, I want to say, get Seminole fans off of Mike Norvell's back, but it would be the sort of move that, when you hear Seminole fans question the direction where this football team is going, not that would answer all the questions, but it would certainly silence a lot of the people who are loud right now and who are saying, what is this team doing? And I think for me, the thing, if you're a Florida State fan, the thing that has to be most exciting is that you're bringing in a potential NFL player at the position that you desperately need it the most. And that's the truth of that matter, because Florida State has just not been where they have been at since they were in the Jimbo Fisher days, when they were producing offensive linemen in the NFL every single year. I mean, you can look back at the NFL 4 or 5 years ago, the amount of guys who were in the league from Tallahassee, that number just isn't the same right now. And no, I think in terms of this commitment, well, let's transition over to what Mims has actually done at Georgia this past year. The first thing I wanted to bring up is just where he's been lining up positionally, and this is all from PFF, so everyone can see. He lined up exclusively as a right tackle for Georgia all of last year, 121 snaps. really they were using him on and off and really to supplement injuries. He wasn't a full-time starter by any means, but this is the type of player, and I know our Adam Brown from X's and Noles, who does excellent, great work, our offensive line coach for all of us, was saying that this kid is a premier tackle. He's going to play left tackle. If not, he's going to play right tackle. But it does seem like a thing for Florida State where he would slide into that left tackle spot. And then if you want to talk about the moves that happen after that, well, what's happening next? To me, and let's bounce this around a little bit. I think what would happen is that you stick in him at that left tackle spot. You keep Les Harris at right tackle where we've seen him. And to me, Robert Scott, he's a guard. And he swings over to right guard. You keep Dylan Givens at left guard. And then honestly, I don't know what the hell is going on with the center position. I'm still have big question marks about that personally, and that's something we can spend some time on another day. But you want to talk about
Washington, like in that scenario? That's kind of a big question. Like if you're going to move him out, like where does he fall in the lineup or in the depth chart? Like because I think he's good.
I think he's good too, but I mean, what do you do in that situation? Because you stick him at center, make him compete there. To me, and we'll talk about this later. Caden Lyles did not impress in the spring game, and he's just not up to speed yet, in my opinion. I think I do want to give him the benefit of the doubt in the sense that, look, he's coming from a system that's completely different, and the language of what he's doing is completely different. Everything is different football-wise for him. So it's a tough transition, and center is one of those spots that is so tough, even on the offensive line. So, I don't know how the rest of that is going to work out, but if this is the type of thing we're talking about, that's only good news for Florida State, because last year, I mean, think about where this team was in the fall, and now we're talking about, hey, do you move Robert Scott inside? What do you do? These types of questions that we're asking now, they're much better questions to ask than, well, what kind of depth does Florida State have? Because last year they were depending on guys they just did not want to even use last season.
Yeah, if I could quote Alex Atkins quoting The Wire, it's one of those good problems. Like, you have the ability to rotate those players around. You have been doing situational work where you have been repping them in at different positions. You have somebody like Mo Smith who can, like, absolutely go anywhere. You are in such a better position right now than, I mean, yeah, last year, but think 2 years ago when, like, literally, like, if somebody went in, you were specifically like, oh, there's going to be a sack on this play. So Florida State is in a much better position now, and that is a huge testament to what Alex Atkins has done.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And one thing I wanted to bring up with Amarius Mims, I know we were discussing this beforehand. He finished the season with a 73.5 offensive grade. If you look at Florida State's grading from last season, that would have finished right behind Jashawn Corbin in terms of highest graded Seminoles. And he would have been the second highest graded offensive lineman on the team. And I know, Tommy, you were talking about this beforehand. It's interesting that Lloyd Willis is there at that fourth spot. But
I'm trying to look at how many snaps he played.
But, well, yeah, they have him at like, 16 snaps?
Okay, that makes
sense. Low sample size. And, that's the thing with all this you have to take into account, especially with the advanced metrics. Sample size matters, obviously. And for Florida State moving forward, obviously this would be an upgrade for the offensive line. But I think overall for the program, and, I want to talk about this now. What do you think it means for Alex Atkins, right? Mike Norvell, for these guys, the type of pressure that they've been under this offseason, just feeling around the team, not that there isn't optimism, but to me, this would raise Florida State, not to the level that it was before, but you want to talk about getting back on the right path to where the Seminoles want to be. This is a step in that direction if they land this kid.
It's a little bit of like, hey, we're still here. Like, it's like FSU has not had the success on the field 4 years. It is just combined into a single like period of sadness. But if you can prove that you can compete on this level in the new world of college football, where like all we've heard is FSU doesn't have the funds and Miami has a crypto billionaire and all of that, and like, they're not getting all the money. Like if you can go head to head and pull this off when NIL is like reported to be a huge factor in this recruitment, it really symbolizes like, hey, like the commitment is there. The boosters and the power players believe in this current staff because otherwise they would not be putting the money towards it unless they were that like, well, God, Miami is spending money. We need to catch up. But it symbolizes like Mike Norvell is not accepting his fate. He's not like, this is year 3, whatever. Alex Atkins is just continuing to raise that profile because I think no matter how this staff's tenure ends in Tallahassee, whether it like turns around, whether it ends in crash and burns, Alex Atkins like profile, his resume is like not untouchable, but he's got it. Like he has elevated himself, he has proven himself as a recruiter, proven himself as a leader. If he can pull off this kind of recruitment in his first year as OC, and then there's tangible improvement on the field, then he's going to be a name that everybody brings up for open positions.
Yeah, everyone's going to be after him. I was telling somebody this yesterday. Like talking to him, he seems like he's going to be head coach somewhere, someday, and we're lucky to have him.
Oh, I don't have any doubt about that. You want to talk about the position he was coming into? I mean, he was at Charlotte beforehand, right, where he was an offensive coordinator, and he joins FSU as an offensive line coach. And then obviously gets the opportunity this past offseason. And I think, like you said, Tommy, especially, I mean, in the interviews, Alex is excellent. Like he is to me, not that, Mike Norvell isn't entertaining, but Alex Atkins just brings a certain energy to the table, right? That is unmatched, even from the Florida State staff, in my opinion. And I think just seeing how he interacts with his players at practice too. I mean, Tommy and I have gotten the benefit of being able to attend all these practices, see how he deals with his players, just the daily interaction. And, if I were a football player, I would want to play for Alex Atkins, honestly. And I'm not trying to be biased or anything. And that I'm telling you, that's totally unbiased, just from the perspective that I think players really appreciate the fact that Alex is the kind of guy who is a straight shooter. He's not gonna try and
That's a
pull the
good term for it. It's straight shooter. It's definitely hits the nail on the head.
No, the fact that Mims is even considering FSU is a testament to the recruitment that Atkins put in when he was Mims was coming out of high school. Because otherwise, like, what connection is there other than Jermaine Johnson transferred to FSU from Georgia? Maybe were they even friends? Or they know each other? Like, that is not a possible connection. Because of the work that this staff put in to create relationships, then they've set themselves up for success with not just Mims, but other transfer portal players in the future, which is the new era of college football. Because if you look, all these transfers, like, they don't pick a random school. There's some connection, either like, hey, I want to go home and play by my family, or this staff recruited me out of high school. And then the staff is like, oh, we know who that kid is. And also you got the training, whatever. So them emphasizing these relationships in a way different than, hey, come play with us. Like, they have emphasized the human being connection. And that's just paying dividends already.
And that's just a testament to, I mean, guys like Alex Atkins, guys like Mike Norvell, in the relationship they built with this kid up and through his recruitment process. And you want to talk about another name too? They're going to be bringing in Julian Armella this summer, right? In terms of potential NFL offensive linemen, if you can, technically you're not bringing Armella in, but you get what I'm saying. You bring both of these guys in the span of a month. That is just taking Florida State to a place that hasn't been since the last 5 years. And as a student for the last 4 years at Florida State, I can tell you that this has not been what it's going to be moving forward. And I think for a guy like Mike Norvell, I mean, this would just be such an impact splash moment. I think people, for me at least, I go back to that Miami game. That's one of the big moments. That could be the big turning point of Mike Norvell at Florida State. And to this would be the follow-up on that. You want to talk about getting one over on Miami again? That's another way to do that, Mike. And if they're able to lock this down and make this happen before he leaves campus this weekend, man, it would just it would be huge for this program.
And that's the thing, locking down, or not even locking down, but like being like in his mind, like, hey, I need to go to FSU before he heads, because I don't know if it's been reported that he is not going to Miami. He is doing his multi-day visit in Tallahassee, so it's assumed that he was probably going to travel down for the spring game on Saturday. We'll see what happens. But if he goes in, like, it's like Tinder dating, like it's like speed dating. Like you just had a great date with these people in Tallahassee. You went hard. You had some good food. Yeah, and then like he is going on another date, and he's going to be like, oh, like she does this. Like, I mean, again, he's not going to Miami. He's going to Fort Lauderdale. They're playing in the soccer stadium, and now we're at Miami. But he's going to get like that lifestyle. Like he's going to get like the appeal. Like Mario Cristobal is from that area. He knows how to sell Miami. He knows how to sell South Florida. So he's going to get like everything dangled in front of him.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Did Norvell and his staff do enough this past 2 days? I almost said this weekend. My brain's already broken.
I think you can. Oh, sorry.
And then I was going to say, well, they have to navigate like certain outlets reporting certain things. And so now there's another hurdle in this recruitment. It's not something that ends it. It's not something that like is a knife in the whole hope, but like you're sitting there enjoying dinner, palling around, being like, ha ha ha. And then all of a sudden the kid's phone blows up from coaching staff, from friends, from everybody saying, did you commit? And so like that's something they had to navigate. That's another hurdle in all of this. So did they do enough? Are they doing enough before he heads on all the other visits?
And he even went out and publicly said, he was like, I haven't committed anywhere yet. Whether or not like that's just what he said on Twitter or not, but that's what he wants the people to know. Like,
yeah, I mean, he liked the post on Twitter himself from the report of 247 saying that he isn't committed anywhere. So if you want to believe anyone, believe the man himself.
I know, like, coming straight from the horse's mouth.
Yeah. Like he might have been like, oh, I would love to play here. And then like maybe like some support staffer was like, oh, he said he would love to play here. And then it escalated. And again, like not to say that report is like maybe they jumped the gun. We don't know if it's false. We don't know if it's true. We know things are angling towards a direction that is favorable towards Florida State. But like, again, it's like dating. Like you just got off, like, unless it's a terrible, terrible one, like you leave that date going, they might be the one. Like, yeah, like
I really hope Miami's like the creeper date. It's like
Miami's just like the
breathing heavily at Mims.
They're liking all the tweets, hopefully.
And I think from Mims' side of things, I will say too, it seems like he's gonna be here for the weekend. Like I've heard, not reporting or officially saying anything, but it seems like his hotel stay is scheduled through Saturday. And you said Miami's spring game is Saturday, so that's just certainly, I don't want to say complicate things, but it makes it that much more interesting. And I think in terms of that report that was supposedly put out last night, what I'll say on that matter, it's pretty simple. I don't think the coaches or anyone inside Florida State put out that information. I know that. So in terms of where everything is headed, to me, nothing's decided yet, but the kid could certainly be leaning a certain way. And he may have had certain conversations with certain people, let's say third parties outside of the program. So in terms of where that leak is coming from, we know that isn't from Mike Norvell and his staff. And I can tell you this without knowing, they're pissed right now. I know they're pissed about this situation in terms of what happened last night. And I'm not saying it's going to complicate things, but we'll certainly see how this all plays out.
It's not like they reported like something bad. So like it's not like a travesty. It's not the worst. Like worst thing he saw was everybody.
No, they didn't pull an Adam Schefter, man. They didn't pull an Adam Schefter.
But like it just doesn't help. Like it's like literally like again, like I keep going back to the date thing, which is a weird thing to do when like talking about athletes and like, but it's like you're texting your friends like, yo, I for sure got her. Like this girl, like she's an idiot. And then like one of the friends texts the girl and be like, oh, so you're and then she's like, no, well, it's done. So like, it's just such a weird dynamic in recruiting always. There's always all this jealousy, pettiness, like weird feelings, pressure on the kid. Like it's his second go around. He knows what's up. He knows what he's looking for. It's all professional. They're still pulling out the big stops, but he doesn't want to deal with like just weird pettiness or anything like that. So to put that into the situation just sucks. Yeah, nobody wants to deal with it.
No, of course not.
I am kind of wondering if they're like, if they can use like the selling point of Jermaine Johnson, coming from Georgia, starting at Florida State, becoming like all ACC, now he's projected to be in the first round, if not the 15th pick. I wonder if they can use that as like a selling point to another Georgia player, if that's even in the mix at all.
Well, I think the thing for me that stands out is this is a Georgia kid too. You want to be talking about close to home. Miami is a lot farther away from home than Tallahassee is. I mean, yeah. Well, Fort Lauderdale, yeah, I guess more specifically. But we'll see how this all plays out. Obviously, the next 48 hours are crucial right now. This commitment could happen 5 minutes from now. It could happen, 36 hours from now. It could be a month from now. Like, obviously, what's going to be happening next in terms of if he visits with Miami or not, how long he is there, if he leaves campus from Tallahassee, that's all the things we're going to be paying attention to. And I'm sure you can see over on Tomahawk Nation, on our social media, on our website, you can see the latest that's going on over there, and we'll keep everything up to date with that. So make sure you go check that out.
You're making my editor heart so happy.
Just a light plug. I do want to transition to something else though, because we could spend like a lot of time on this whole discussion, but we're just speculating at this point, and it is very exciting. But it's one of those things that you just never know until you know, and we'll certainly see how the next couple of days go. But the spring game was this weekend. It was to me, that was a very strange format for a spring game. I don't know about you, Tommy, but sitting in the booth, I was very confused with what was actually going on.
In the beginning, yeah. I remember I even turned and looked at Austin, and I was like, man, it feels like we're just at practice. Like, it was so weird. I don't understand why. I mean, I guess I see it like in hindsight, but at the time I didn't understand why that format was.
Because they did it last year as well. And so I think that's just Mike's thing. I haven't looked into how he did it at Memphis exactly, but I think he is pretty much, I'm paraphrasing, saying screw it. We're just still going to get a practice in. Like, you guys can enjoy some 11 on 11 and make it look like it's a game, but like a spring game in everybody's mind is you draft two teams. It's Garnet versus Gold. It's a real game. They keep score. And I don't think FSU did a good enough job putting that out there. Like the media.
Well, I mean, ACC Network really dropped the ball, it seems.
This week. They hyped it up like it was a real game. They dropped the ball on the actual broadcast side of things because they would just cut out because they didn't know what was going on either. They thought it was a game, but then they realized it was practice, and they're like, oh, nothing important is going to happen. But so for the team, great spring game. Like overall, like good work. Like they got the reps, they got their stuff figured out. They had a crowd around them. They dealt with all of that. For the fans, if you got them for free and you're a student, congratulations. You got a free practice. For everybody else who had to pay $10, that's $10. People who had to drive up and attend that game and pay for a hotel and do all that, I feel bad for you. Because while it is good for the team, it's not like a huge production. You had some like D-list country star perform after. The coolest game or concert they've ever had after a spring game was Willie's first year when they had like Vanilla Ice and Salt and Pepper, and that was like
remember that?
Yeah, the only legitimate spring game concert. But yeah, as far as like format and whatever, like it is not entertaining to the people, but you have to kind of separate that, like being the annoyance that you didn't get a witness, like Jameis Winston throwing a bomb on his first play for a touchdown. and be like, all right, well, they look better. Like just overall, in terms of execution, in terms of body, in terms of just depth, appearance, whatever, they look better overall. And Triple Option actually did a great video, like looking back on it and kind of separating the broadcast sucked and the format sucked, but the team though,
But
like
the team,
that's pretty good.
one-on-ones.
Well, and I think some,
I enjoy
just kind of reading the tea leaves of what fans were saying afterwards and what the media discussion was. There was some sense of like, oh, the passing game didn't look good. They didn't throw it for like 400 yards. I don't know. I don't know about you, Tommy, but my whole impression of this spring session, from what we've been seeing in practice, this team protects the quarterback to the old in a way that they should, right? In that where they have the green jerseys on, they don't let them touch them, and for a guy like Jordan Travis, who is using his playmaking, his play extending ability so much, it is like the worst display of his skill set, in my opinion. And for me, the spring period, Tommy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was really him working on progressions, reading the field, being a more nuanced passer, those sort of things where he can't play on all the advantages that he has as an athlete.
I think that's even going back into the Willie Taggart days. I think that's why people thought that Travis like wasn't the best quarterback, and they were like, oh, "We want Hornibrook or we want Blackman," like because he doesn't get touched. He doesn't get to use his like most useful asset with his legs, in practice, so you don't see it. And now that he's developing a passing game and he's developing being able to read the field, go through his progressions, like you said, and he's got better wide receivers, more experienced wide receivers to throw to. I think that he's going to take another step this season, and I hope he stays around for another season.
That's what people don't. I think if people attended to practice more often, like on any level, they would realize it is ugly. Practice is practice for a reason. Like they make mistakes constantly, and that's what like you are repping for when you have to do it perfectly. And so, like you said, like he is not getting the chance to just take off for 100 yards because what's the point of that?
They blow it dead. Like the second he gets out, they blow it dead.
The second he gets out, they blow it dead. They can't touch him anyways. Like who knows if it's even real? Like honestly, the only true like reps are like the running plays because like everybody's actually getting contact. But even then, quick whistle, blah blah blah. Everything's angled towards the defense. The defense has all the advantages in spring, which is why if the defense is ahead of the offense, you're good. If the offense is blowing out the defense, then you are like that's when you're in trouble. So overall, like Travis has his issues. We know the mistakes and flaws that he has to work on and improve. But like you mentioned, the fact that he's focusing on progression, the fact that he's focusing on the accuracy, the throwing, the timing, means that he is trying to take that next step rather than just being like, yo, I'm an athlete. This receiver is going to be open or I'm going to run it.
Yeah, and I think with Jordan this year, it's going to be about progressing as a passer. His ability as a runner, like no one has ever doubted that. His like I said, his play extending ability, it just gives him a different margin of error that you see from traditional pocket passers, where a pocket passer, if he misses his first read, if he doesn't get the play right within the first 2.5 seconds of the play, you're kind of screwed. Jordan Travis, that is not the case. So if you think about him versus a guy like even Tate, right? Tate Rodemaker, every advantage plays to his skill set in the spring. I think that's why people become so positive about him in the spring. And, Tommy and I have discussed this personally a lot off air, how he'll have a great drive. He'll put together 5 or 6 passes. And I remember there was one day specifically, Tommy knows exactly what I'm talking about, where he drove the ball down the field into the red zone. And then he made the worst read I've ever seen in my entire life. I'm not even going to lie. Like he made just an awful read. And that's the up and downs of a guy like Tate who takes those chances, right? Who goes for the big play.
What Perry was saying, though, like, it's practice still. But, no, I do agree. I know what you're talking about. It was that interception at the corner of the end zone. Where
yeah,
and I don't even want to bag on him, but it looked bad.
It was just one of those plays where in the moment, as I saw it happening, I was thinking to myself, no, he's not actually going to throw this. And then he did. And I will say his ball placement wasn't terrible, but just,
The
I
wrong
mean, just
person.
He lost the safety is what happened. He
yeah, the
lost
decision making there, man. You just can't do those sorts of things, even if you're trying to push the ball in practice. Like Tommy and I say, they're trying to not make mistakes on purpose, but they're pushing the envelope, right? In these practices. He was doing a little more than that. I mean, it was just a risk he shouldn't have taken. And I think that's something you see from him consistently. It's that inconsistency that he has, right? Where he has those plays. I remember I was watching back some of the spring game footage, and there was one just great sideline pass that he made, back shoulder, like just ridiculous ball placement, put it right where you want it, and then he went and made a boneheaded play because that's just what he does. And I think talking about this quarterback discussion overall, that's the main thing I want to say to Florida State fans who maybe if you're doubting Jordan at all, this whole spring situation, it placates to a guy like Tate so much more than it does Jordan. It just to his advantages. So once they actually get into playing real football, Jordan Travis is an awesome football player. He is a much better football player than Tate Rodemaker is. There's just no question about that in my mind. And I think also I want to pivot this discussion to this. How much do you guys think the offensive line, the new wide receivers they brought in, how much can that make life easier for Jordan? I mean, obviously, there's a big transfer that could happen today, even potentially. But as the roster sits right now, according to our outlet, at least, Tomahawk Nation, um, how do you think things stand for Jordan, especially you, Perry? Because I know you haven't really gotten to see practice like we have as much. Looking at that spring game, do you feel like things are improved enough around Jordan to where they can elevate the team a little bit, and it will make life easier for him? Because I think part of why we may have seen struggles from him at any point is just because he doesn't have the support around him that he needs.
Yeah, especially like the offensive line is where it not needs to be, but it was serviceable last year. You lost a player, it kind of faltered off a bit, but they did a pretty good job protecting Jordan last year. Where it really, really hurt him was, as you mentioned, the receivers. Like he had the help from Corbin, he had Ward to be able to hand off, and like they were fantastic. But hey, Dad.
What's up, Adam? How you
Hi,
doing?
Coach AB. But the fact that they have basically flipped this receiver room, they have added talent to the talent they had. Like Bogey Wilson's still good, Keyshawn Helton's still reliable. Ja'Kai Douglas is literally everything. So like you can match him as a receiver, but he is like good. Like he is probably somebody who benefits from Jordan's skill set the most because he just gets open because of the terrifying part of Jordan's legs. You add in them, and then you add in a consistent, experienced receiver like Pittman. You have Winston Wright, who maybe, possibly could.
Yeah, I think the
maybe.
timeline on him, I don't want to
Yeah.
speculate Perry too much, but it does seem like they
Norvell's
could have him.
optimistic, yeah. Like, but he's been optimistic about players before. Like last year,
Right.
Emmett Rice, like he kept being like, he
Yeah,
could be.
I don't know.
Same with Hamson Nezardine. Like Norvell with injuries is a little bit ambiguous, but losing Winston.
But
Wright
he didn't totally shut down the idea that he wasn't like, oh, there's no way he's available,
Yeah, he's not
right? Which I
coming
think is a good
I think he did that
sign
with
because
Briggs too. He actually came out and said like it's like he's going to be out. Was that Briggs? Pretty sure it was Briggs.
yeah, I think it may have been Briggs. But I
I
think
remember
that
at the press conference he was like, he's done. He's done for the season.
Yeah, he's done that once. Yeah. But Johnny Wilson, if you can take a step and be that big body receiver, you need that. That's the only real main concern I have is that there isn't that consistent big body break coverage be open player. But Jordan can hit the open man. Jordan kind of squeezes in those windows. He's not Aaron Rodgers when it comes to squeezing in the but like he can hit the open man. He has accuracy. It's funny because you've mentioned like how good of an athlete it is. He is, and people process that he's good at running the ball and that he is talented there, but they don't realize he was the number 26 ranked quarterback according to PFF last year, which is like more than you can ask from a quarterback usually at the college level because sometimes your quarterback is hampering you. And like the fact that you have an athlete that can actually give you wins and actually lead you to victory is more than you can ask for at this level. And yes, he has his flaws. Yes, he needs to improve. But I think that the receiver talent that they brought in addition to the offensive line bolstering, maybe with a little bit more, a little bit of sprinkle on top, will help out. But I think just adding those pieces around him is going to elevate his game. Just the same way we saw it elevate last year from the year before. Like he takes a step up each year. Year 3 is usually when we see that progression from a quarterback.
And I'm glad you mentioned that part about Jordan being graded so highly because I think there was. I'm just going to bring this up from PFF. I was as you were talking. His time to throw when you order in terms of Division One quarterbacks, he was at 3.25 seconds. That's fourth highest. The only guys higher than him are guys like Caleb Williams, Malik Willis, Timmy. I mean, and I don't know if that's a testament to Jordan's athleticism, the offensive line, or both. I think it's probably a mix of both, right? It just goes to show that if I think if you can give Jordan the ability to have those quick throws built in, to have better receivers who are going to get possession of the ball, it should make life that much easier for him. And he was under pressure on 40% of his dropbacks last year. That is an insane number. Even when you consider the fact that he is a running quarterback who's going to break outside the pocket and be under pressure when he's on the move, that's still that idea that 4 out of 10 plays he's under pressure. That just can't happen again. And to me, obviously, you mentioned the receiver thing, Perry, and we'll talk about that a little more. But I think the thing for me that is the most important is that offensive line because when you talk about the running game, I mean, I think in the ACC, this team ranked dead last in run blocking grade. They were 52.6 or something like that. That is just god awful. Like there's no getting around that.
That's a testament to Corbin right there.
Yeah. No, seriously. And if they just improve to an average or slightly below average run blocking, pass blocking to where it's not such an Achilles heel, man, for a guy like Jordan Travis, I just think it's going to make a world of difference. And you saw how good the running game was last year. I mean, they were the second best running attack in the ACC by most metrics. So, look, I think the receivers are the room that I'm still the most worried about. And that to me is still that weakness that you don't have questions answered at. But if we're talking about what's more important than the other, or if one is more important than the other, the offensive line for me is so important because of how much this team is focused on the run, because of how much they are going to be relying on Jordan Travis. You have to keep him upright.
Run the pass.
Yeah. And that's the other thing is that they need to keep Jordan Travis healthy this season. Obviously, part of that is on him, right? It's not all the team's fault around him. But to a certain extent, this offensive line needs to be able to protect him in a way they just weren't, right? And for me, having a full season of Jordan Travis is the most important thing for him this year. If you lose Jordan Travis for 2-3 games, it is not going to be pretty.
The offensive line situation is just going to be that more like much exacerbated, like because you have a pocket passer now, and now you have to have an offensive line that can hold the pocket. You know, Jordan or Tate's athletic enough to run, like he's shown that, but that's traditionally when I see him in, it's like the run threat is not as big as you would see with Jordan Travis. You know, he can throw the ball and he makes mistakes like you mentioned earlier, but the run threat just isn't there with Tate, and I think defenses know that.
Oh, absolutely. Like they would just play Florida State a completely different way. Right now, if you're a defensive coordinator preparing to play the Seminoles this fall, you start with Jordan Travis. That is your starting point. You are building your defense and what you're going to be doing schematically around his ability. And not just only his ability as an athlete, but to me, his explosive play ability, because he is, like you mentioned, Perry, 10 minutes ago, his ability to extend the play and create downfield for guys like Ja'Kai Douglas or Johnny Wilson or all these new targets, Micah Pittman, that he's going to have in those breakaway plays. that's where you really get hurt as a defense. So yeah, I think part of the team being better is gonna be that offensive line improvement, but I still think the wide receiver room is not where it needs to be. And we can talk a little bit about that now. I wanted to touch on what did you guys think were some of the most underwhelming parts of the spring game? I want to start with you, Perry, because I know, you're outside watching and you're not at practice necessarily. So this is the first kind of fresh view you get to see of these guys.
It isn't really something you can get too mad about at a spring game. I'm kind of going like the fan mindset here, but like where there weren't too many explosive plays. Like the defense won the day, which again is a good thing. You want the defense outperforming. You want the defense showcasing it, especially when they know the plays and especially when they're the same plays over and over. And it's in that kind of situation. But I think the coolest pass play we saw was Travis to Trishawn Ward on the side. Like he had a nice little like sideline grab. Outside of that, I mean, it was the play calling again. Like I don't know what was put in there. I don't know if they told Travis not to push it. You don't know what is going on in that situation, but we didn't see like a cool like 40-yard pass last year.
I was gonna say the one play you could have had that would have been that play was Ja'Kai Douglas when he got defensive pass interference. Oh, he should have got it 2 times, in my opinion. I know I'm a Ja'Kai Douglas guy, but there are 2 instances where he's running downfield, and that's the kind of thing you expect from him in the fall. When we talk about Jordan breaking the pocket, finding guys downfield, it's going to be a guy like Ja'Kai Douglas who's going to be running wide open when the defensive backs are waiting 4 or 5 seconds and they're still playing. That's the kind of explosive plays that we expect to see. And maybe we just don't get to see that because of the formatting of the spring.
Yeah,
and
we didn't see like Ward go on a wheel route. Like we didn't see anything like, again, like that could just be how Norvell fixed it. He didn't want to like be all flashy just to impress the people there. Like he wanted them to get a legitimate work day. But last year when you had McKenzie versus Travis, like you had Malik McLean catching a huge pass downfield. You had everybody like rotating, like making plays. But again, that could just have not been the focus of the team. They could have probably cared less about I dropped a wrapper on my dog and he freaked out because he can't see anything because he has a cone on his head. But the spring game format didn't lend itself to explosive plays. So I say it, can you hear him freaking out? I say it with like a grain of salt that there were no huge pass plays, but just the like football fan in me who likes excitement and hoopla, like it would have been nice to see like a 50-yard bomb because Travis has that deep arm. One of the best throws we saw from him was in the Jacksonville State game last year when he like initiated that comeback by bombing it deep downfield.
Or the play in the Miami game down the sideline to who was it? Ja'Kai Douglas.
Ja'Kai. So, the one in the Notre Dame game to Ja'Kai. Like he has the ability to hit the open receiver, place the ball where it needs to be to let them get the yards after catch. They didn't allow him, or he did not make the plays to do it in the spring game, which I think affected the perception of everything. But outside of that, like maybe the offensive line gives me a little bit of concern. Like maybe the depth at defensive end, like maybe gives me a little bit of concern. But like underwhelming, I don't know if I can really pinpoint anything specific that I'm like, oh god, outside of the receiver room. But again, it's not like it's like
It's more just that you would have liked to see a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
Like you said,
just,
more explosive
just a little bit
plays.
of sprinkle. Yeah, a little bam.
They were there though. They just weren't like as apparent as what you would want to see. But like what Perry was saying, I think that he treated that as like an additional practice, and it will pay off. If they're practicing more in this before the season, it's gonna improve on the field. So I kind of see what his mindset is there. However, you do have to balance the fans' perception because we get to see this. Me and you, Ben, we get to see this, twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week, but everyone else just sees it once the spring. So we kind of have to balance that. But I do understand why he made it like more of a practice because he's worried about winning. He's not worried about, what the talking heads are going to say about his explosive plays.
Exactly. He's not worried about the highlights after the spring game. He's not worrying about that. I think for me, I'm going to pinpoint one player actually who was underwhelming. and we talked about him earlier, was Caden Lyles. I just thought there were a few instances where you see him get beat from the interior of the defensive line, and I think that's the strength of this defense this year, one of the strengths. But still, to me, Tommy, I don't know about you, but I was trying to see more from Caden from what we've seen from spring. I hadn't seen one practice or one set of practices or even a stretch of plays where I was really just impressed by him, and seeing what he did in the spring game. It does give me that much more pause where some people will tell you, hey, no doubt Caden Lyles, he's going to be the starter by the time fall rolls around. I just don't know if I feel that same way. I've heard reputable people say that, like people who know better than me. I'm telling you, that's just not what I saw.
I haven't seen a ton of him in practice, but if you look at it like they're treating that game as another practice, I think they might have just been still feeling out what they're doing with the offensive line and trying to balance that with, putting something for television. As far as Lyles, he never really stood out to me, but I understand he's good. The guy's huge, and he's got good technique, but he's kind of just like you don't notice him.
No, and I think one of the things that Atkins has been emphasizing is putting them in challenging positions. You mentioned it a whole bunch. It could be the coach speak for being like, yo, these guys are not ready, so that's why they're not looking like that. But I'll give a little bit of trust to what Atkins is saying, because I do like the fact that they are rotating around so much, the fact that they're placing players in different positions and making sure everyone gets reps at center, guard, tackle, it doesn't matter, means that they're going to struggle a bit. Like, it's a little bit of like crawling before you walk. And especially for somebody like Lyles, who had to transfer in and kind of figure out the new scheme, the new adjustment, like that's why it's important he's here for spring. Because, I mean, Jermaine Johnson looked good last spring, but he was not Jermaine Johnson first round pick yet. But because he was here so early, it helped him out. So Lyles isn't where he needs to be, but for the offensive line to be what it needs to be, hopefully through this like off season, through workouts, through just kind of like getting time to stay by himself, study the playbook, study the formation, study the just process that Alex Atkins and Florida State goes through. By the time August hits, we'll have like a way more clear idea of like how he is comfortable.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing for me with a guy like Caden who's transferring in is we just don't know what it's going to look like when fall rolls around. It could look much different. I just think for me, there just hasn't been enough there yet for me to be unquestionably like, hey, he's going to be starting. I just don't feel that way after seeing what I saw this spring, and things could certainly change. And I kind of expect things to change slightly. I don't know to what degree, but for a guy like Caden, you're right. This spring for him, it's about getting all the kinks out, right? It's about working out all that struggle that you might have adjusting to I think Dylan Gibbons said on his own podcast, a guy like Caden, he's learning a completely different system that he hasn't run before. It's a completely different language than he's ever dealt with. So it's just a different transition for him. But I do want to move on to one last thing before we get out of here, because I know we're getting a little close to when we need to end. And for everyone watching, like, subscribe, let us know how you guys are feeling about Florida State in the comments.
Am I pointing it the right way?
Yeah, just down somewhere that way. Make sure you Will Smith that like button. Anyway, oh man, me and my transitions just on point today. But in terms of the newcomers that we've been seeing on campus, to me, Micah Pittman, and I saw in the comments earlier, Micah Pittman is that guy who has stood out of all of the new transfers. Micah Pittman, and actually, you know what? Trey Benson too. Let's give Trey Benson a shout out, because man, did he look amazing in that spring game. And I think, like, going into that spring game, that's just not something that we expected being at practice. We had not seen that yet from him. That to me was the biggest surprise. And I'm actually starting to really think that he's going to challenge Trayshawn Ward for that number 1 running back spot.
Yeah, because, I mean, the reports coming out of the scrimmages where Norvell will be like, yeah, he had a touchdown. he scored again today, and you're like, okay, probably from like 10 yards out. Like he hasn't been wearing a brace, which number one is like a great sign because then you're like, okay, he is comfortable, he's confident in his leg. You just saw him doing normal football stuff because the practice I was at, like he looked okay, like he was not even okay as in like talent wise, like he just looked okay, healthy, like he looked good. But for him to like literally just be reeling off these huge runs, I think only one of his carries was not like a at least 8-yard run. Like he was just knocking them off.
He was averaging 12 and a half yards per carry at some point. I think he finished the game.
inserted himself into the like knowledge of the fan base. Like maybe they had kind of heard of him before, but if they watched the spring game, they're like, oh, I know who Trey Benson is. But I think between Benson and Pittman have been like the most impressive newcomers. Verse is just like Jared Verse, the defensive end, absolute freak. He still needs to adjust a little bit and learn how to not how to compete at this level, but just kind of how to like fit into a scheme at this level rather than being the absolute freakiest athlete on the field. But I'm a big fan of Pittman, from like what he's doing off the field to like networking to he's making great connections. His YouTube channel gives great insight. Like I'm very happy with the Oregon transfers. Much better than the last time we stole something from Oregon.
And I think the thing that has to give you even more optimism about all those players you just mentioned, those guys are going to be here for a few years. They're not just one and done guys at Florida State. I mean, for Trey Benson too, I wanted to make sure I mentioned this specifically. I was most impressed by his speed, the way he was hitting the edge. Once he did get just that little bit of sunlight, he looked like Florida State's best running back, like
gone.
by far.
And then it was up to the safeties to push him out of bounds with the whole thing.
Right, and those safeties are excellent. I mean, to me, those safeties are going to be one of the strengths of this team this year, and they were literally the last ones there on like 3 or 4 of those runs that he had. I think if you look back to the article I posted on a Tomahawk Nation after the spring game, he finished with about 4 plays of 15 plus yards, 7 carries total.
7 yards per. No, that was the team average.
No. He finished with like 11 yards per carry average. He finished the game with 7 carries, 77 yards. Like this is a guy who he I don't want to say he's the Jayshon Corbin replacement because they're different players, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of productivity, he fits in right in that slot, and he's going to be that guy. The one guy who to me has been a little inconsistent and I think needs to develop a little more, but they're just still going to get some decent play out of him. This guy like Johnny Wilson, just a little inconsistent with the drops we see from him. Sometimes the footwork it's just not exactly where it needs to be a lot of the time. There's some issues with that, but I think overall, you just look at him from a football perspective, his blocking ability alone is going to be a huge part of why he's valuable for Florida State this year. Even if he doesn't, catch a ton of contested catches, which I think he will. I think he'll get his opportunity. Yeah, he'll get his opportunity, but he brings a lot of value as just a football player, in my opinion.
The thing is, when you see like that brief portion of the spring game, he dropped a couple passes, but he dropped some in practice, but it's not nearly as like he must have just had a bad day or something.
That was definitely his worst day.
Yeah, because I've seen him make some great catches and some great routes, but also he slips sometimes. But that's just being nitpicky. I think that he's going to be in the rotation and probably one of the better receivers this season.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything from the spring game overall that adjusted my win total or expectations for the season. Maybe only solidified them in a positive way. But
I think it was a lot of like confirmation bias, not like in a bad way,
yeah,
right?
On either side, yeah.
Right, but it's more just what we thought going into that game, confirming that from what we've seen. And I think for the most part, the one surprise you want to call it was Trey Benson, and it was a really good surprise, right?
Fantastic,
there wasn't any player who went out on the field and you just watched them
and DJ Williams.
Yeah, the running back room in general, like that's a staple of a Mike Norvell team. It's a staple of like what they want to do. Alex Atkins is just ecstatic over the like depth chart that they have there because Ward, Williams, Benson, and then
Williams
Joe
and Campbell.
Philly,
Yeah, CJ.
CJ. Like that's 6. Well, CJ's a walk on. So like we'll even just go. Did I only count 4? I'm not good at this. This is why I write. But like that's at 4 or 5 capable running backs, so you can stick in and you know that they can make a play. Will they make it every time? No, because this isn't NCAA football. But the fact that you have a heavy hitter in DJ, the fact that you have these athletes in Ward and in Tophilly and in Benson, just absolutely, and it plays into taking pressure off Jordan. Like that's just another thing that elevates his offense because last year was run the ball, Jordan will hit it when it's there. This year it's you have the tools, you have the capabilities to do what you want. Can this staff and team execute that?
Yeah, and I think the last guy I wanted to mention, I know we talked about him, but Micah Pittman, to me, he's just going to be FSU's most reliable receiver this year. That is my biggest takeaway from the spring from the receiver room. A guy like Malik McLean, Johnny Wilson, they have all the upside in the world. They have the ability to potentially be that true X receiver that we think they may be. Micah Pittman, he's going to move all over the field. We're going to see him in the slot, outside the slot. We're going to see him in that trips formation. They're going to use him at the line of scrimmage. They're going to use him downfield. He's the ultimate versatility guy. And I don't know if he's going to finish the season with the most catches, most yards, most touchdowns, anything like that. But I think from a game-to-game basis, Micah Pittman is absolutely going to be the most reliable offensive weapon in terms of the receiving room. And I also really liked what I saw from the backs receiving. Honestly, I thought the backs, all the running backs, Trayshawn Ward, Toafili, even some guys like DJ Williams, CJ Campbell, they still looked very capable. And it's going to be one of those things that I think it's only going to elevate the offense. You have all those guys who can do all those different things. I think for a Mike Norvell offense, having that kind of versatility, all these guys who can do all these kinds of different things, receivers who are different shapes and sizes. You know, we're talking about a guy like Micah Pittman and Ja'Kai Douglas who are under 6 foot and who are little, you know, kind of balls of muscle, I think is what Mike Norvell referred to Pittman as. And then you have Malik McLean and Johnny Wilson who are
just like
giants,
huge.
right? So I think for this year with this offense, having that diverse skill set of weapons, those guys who can do all those different things, it should make life easier. I just don't know what the ceiling of that room is overall, and that's really what I question. You know, how much can they really improve next year? Because to me, 2023 is the year where I think it's going to skyrocket, where I think it should be even up and up and up. And I still look at 2022 not as a transition year necessarily, but for the receiver room, it's still not where it quite needs to be. And I think that's fair.
I think 2022 is like a proof of concept year. Like we
That's
were in FSU was in beta the last 2 years. They just got out of testing. And now it's like we're taking this to the open market, limited release. Let's see if it works. And we'll see where the ceiling of this team is, because last year, I'm off the top guessing here, I think it was like 23, 24 points per game. They did not exceed I think Norvell wants to hit 30. Like that's like kind of his goal. In Memphis, they were high scoring offenses. So is this year the year that they elevate just their points per game? Because the defense can take care of things. We've seen that happen. We've seen it happen they came on late last year. It was a little bit of a struggle first. But if this offense can elevate and actually put the points up, it takes the pressure off the defense. So is the wide receiver room going to elevate and at least have a baseline of where they can be consistent? Because even just a consistent room from the wide receivers is going to change things so much.
It would be a world of difference to have that level of consistency. I mean, we'll talk about the receiver room from the offensive line. If they just have consistent, like average, not average level, but they know exactly. Yeah, but if they know exactly what they're getting out of these rooms on a game-to-game basis, it's just going to change everything for a guy like Jordan Travis, where there were just so many constant question marks on a weekly basis with this team. To me, that's the biggest thing that if you want to talk about Florida State improving themselves, just getting better, raising that win total, looking much more promising. That level of consistency, that's going to be the key this year for me in terms of from last year to this year. And I think that's the thing. If you're Mike Norvell, you got to be really excited about that because you just didn't know what to expect at certain times last year.
Yeah, they were one-score games majority of the time, went either way. It was a coin flip. And in coin flip scenarios, if you do it again, that's odds, baby. Second time around, you're going to win, which is the theory, which is what they are hoping. They think that they put the platform in to be successful in the future. Last year, they went through all of that ridiculousness. They went 0-4 to then reel off that win streak, but then to end it with an easily winnable game against UF. Are they going to propel themselves into fall with the lessons learned from spring, with the failures from last year, and turn that into success?
Yeah, and I think that's the question the staff has to be asking themselves. I think you nailed that, Perry. And you know what? I think that's a good place to leave off today because I think we covered a lot of what we wanted to cover, and we'll certainly be back sometime next week. You know what? If there's a commitment, we might be back sooner than that. Hopefully, there is. We'll
It's like
see.
in 10 minutes.
Yeah,
10
watch
minutes
as soon as
from
you
the
end the
next.
stream.
Well, you know what? I'm gonna check Twitter right now just in case.
I went and looked.
Okay, just making sure. Anyways, so
Oh, well,
that is,
Hunter Washington entered the transfer portal.
I did just see that from our Max Escarpio. So hey, if you guys want to go read about that, I'm sure Max will probably have something up about that pretty soon. So go over to Tomahawk Nation. Make sure you go do that. Go watch X's and Noles if you haven't already. They are excellent. They do excellent work. And if you want to learn more about football, that is the place to
That's the
go.
place to go. And not just because I work with them. That is like the bread and butter of X's and O's if you want that kind of content.
Just being smart. That's
Yep.
the goal.
Just smart.
Yeah, if you want to be a smarter football fan, go do yourself a favor. Go over to X's and Noles. That is going to be it today. Thank you so much if you tuned in. We'll see what happens over this weekend. It's going to be very, very, very interesting. We'll see you guys next time. I appreciate you tuning in. If you did, head over to Tomahawk Nation. Peace.